In the lobby of a luxurious hotel, a small blonde boy with blue eyes spontaneously approaches the CEO and makes a shocking revelation. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Henry Lancaster never intended to become the focus of hushed whispers in that opulent hotel lobby. He was there for a conference, his name embossed on every brochure touting him as the keynote speaker, a self-made millionaire CEO with an empire rooted in tech innovations. That evening, the hotel's marble floors glistened under shimmering chandeliers, and the hum of polite conversation reverberated against golden walls. Guests and dignitaries crossed the lobby with an air of calm sophistication, yet Henry felt more disconnected than ever. He was staring at his phone, scanning last-minute updates for his speech, when a small voice cut through the polished ambiance. "Mom said you're my dad," the boy announced. In that moment, the entire lobby seemed to pause. Henry's heart pounded, and he pivoted to see a child, no more than 7, looking straight at him. The boy's hazel eyes held a blend of uncertainty and quiet determination, an expression far too serious for someone so young. He clutched a worn backpack against his chest, his rumpled t-shirt and faded sneakers contrasting sharply with the polished suits flitting about the corridor. For one surreal second, Henry wondered if the child was part of some elaborate prank, but the slight tremor in the boy's voice hinted at genuine fear. People nearby slowed their steps, ears pricked by the drama unfolding in front of them. Henry knelt down, ignoring the astonished stares. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The child swallowed, then answered in a barely audible whisper, "Logan." 1,000 questions coursed through Henry's mind, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Where is your mom?" he managed finally. Logan looked around anxiously, as though expecting someone to appear from behind one of the towering marble pillars. "She's sick," he said, voice trembling. "We're staying upstairs in a room. She told me to come down and find you if anything happened. She said you would help." Henry's thoughts whirled. He was certain he'd never met this child, yet the boy spoke with earnest conviction. Henry glanced around the lobby, mind racing to recall any fleeting encounter that might explain this. His security detail hung back, unsure whether to intervene. Slowly, Henry rose to his feet, guiding Logan gently by the shoulder. "All right," he said, maintaining a cool facade despite the turmoil in his chest. "Take me to your mom. We'll see what's going on." The child nodded, eyes wet with relief. They navigated the opulent corridors and gilded elevators, rising to the 20th floor, the hush between them thick with anticipation. Henry could scarcely believe what was happening. In the span of mere minutes, his meticulously planned evening had spiraled into something far more personal and urgent. When they reached room 2012, Logan fumbled with the key card, then pushed open the door. Inside, dim lamps revealed a small suite, its bed unmade and clothes scattered about. On the bed lay a woman, her skin pale, her breathing shallow. She coughed raggedly, eyes flickering open when she heard footsteps. "Mom," Logan murmured, rushing to her side. Henry stood there, uncertainty gnawing at him. The woman looked at him with labored confusion, her gaze drifting from Logan to Henry and back. A spark of recognition lit her face. "You found him," she whispered, forcing a weak smile. Henry's throat tightened. He had no idea who she was, yet the way she looked at him spoke of familiarity, even relief. Logan gripped her hand, tears beginning to pool in his eyes. "Mom, I told him what you said," the boy admitted, voice quivering. "I said he's my dad." Henry felt as if the floor had vanished beneath him. Every muscle in his body tensed. He wanted to deny it, wanted to declare there must be a mistake, but the woman's frail nod stabbed through his disbelief. "Henry," she managed, I tried to reach you. I got sick so fast, I couldn't." Her words faltered, punctuated by another violent cough. Henry rushed forward, grabbing the phone on the bedside table. He dialed the hotel's front desk, urgency coating his voice as he requested medical assistance. A tightness gripped his chest, a jarring mixture of shock and concern. The woman on the bed seemed barely conscious now, her eyes drifting shut as she fought for breath. Logan trembled, pressing himself against her side. Henry placed a tentative hand on the boy's shoulder. "She's going to be okay," he said, though he wasn't sure if that was true. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, their hushed efficiency heightening the tension. They carried the woman out on a stretcher, Logan clinging to her until a medic gently urged him to step aside. Henry watched the boy, realizing with startling clarity that he couldn't just walk away. Not now. The child turned to him, fear etched across his face. "Is she going to die?" Logan asked, voice trembling with raw anxiety. Henry shook his head. "We'll make sure she gets help," he promised, though fear gnawed at him too. He had never been the type to console children, let alone consider the possibility of fatherhood. Yet looking at Logan, he felt a pang of protectiveness, an instinct he didn't recognize. In the hallway, he pulled aside one of the paramedics, explaining the situation in hushed tones. The medic confirmed the woman needed immediate hospitalization and suggested Henry bring the boy along rather than leave him behind. The reality sank in. Henry would have to accompany them to the hospital, a child by his side, a child who claimed to be his own. Every cell in his body buzzed with uncertainty. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. Henry had ridden in luxury vehicles his entire adult life, but never had he felt so powerless. Logan huddled against him, eyes focused on the stretcher where his mother lay, oxygen mask strapped over her face. As they sped through the city, Henry's mind reeled. How could he have fathered a child and not known? Who was this woman who clearly recognized him but had never appeared in his life before? And most pressingly, what was he supposed to do next? The paramedics spoke in clipped sentences, their urgency evident. Henry felt the weight of Logan's trust settle heavily on his shoulders, a responsibility he had never anticipated. By the time they reached the hospital, Henry's thoughts were spinning in endless loops. In the emergency ward, doctors and nurses rushed the woman into an examination room. Henry was left standing in the corridor with Logan clinging to his side. The bright fluorescent lights seemed to highlight every uneasy line on Henry's face. A nurse approached, gently explaining they needed to stabilize the patient. Logan shot Henry a frightened look. Henry guided him to a chair, searching for any semblance of reassurance in his own words. "We'll stay here until we know more," he said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. It was a flimsy promise, but it was all he could give. Hours trickled by, punctuated by the steady beep of monitors and the hum of hospital life. Logan eventually dozed off, his head resting against Henry's arm. Henry stared into space, mind numb with questions. When a doctor finally emerged, Henry rose, gently shifting Logan aside. The prognosis was guarded: pneumonia, compounded by weeks of neglect. "She'll need rest and proper care," the doctor said, eyeing Henry expectantly. Henry nodded, pulse pounding. As he watched Logan stir awake, he felt something shift inside him. This boy needed someone to stay. "We won't leave her," Henry murmured, meeting the child's anxious gaze. "I promise. Before you hear what happens next, please subscribe to our channel today, share with friends." Henry barely recognized himself in the reflection of the hospital's corridor window. He saw the faint outlines of his tailored suit, the crisp lines now creased from hours of waiting. His hair, usually neat, looked unruly, and the dull glaze in his eyes betrayed his sleeplessness. But none of these superficial details weighed on him as heavily as the sight of Logan curled in an uncomfortable chair, struggling to stay awake. The boy's hair flopped across his forehead, and his small hands clasped together, as though bracing for the worst. Henry had promised the child he wouldn't leave, and it was a promise he intended to keep. A nurse walked by, briefly lifting her gaze. She gave Henry a polite, sympathetic smile before continuing on her rounds. Somewhere behind the swinging doors, Logan's mother, this woman who had recognized Henry, fought to regain her strength. The notion that she had sought him out, telling Logan, "He's your dad," left Henry dazed. If it were a misunderstanding, it had gone uncorrected. If it were a lie, there was no clear motive. The only certainty was the urgency in Logan's eyes each time he looked at Henry. Sensing movement, Henry turned to find the boy awake. Logan rubbed his eyes and blinked. "Is there any news?" he asked, voice barely louder than a whisper. Henry placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Not yet," he murmured. "Let's get you something to eat, okay?" Logan nodded, albeit reluctantly, as if afraid to leave the corridor in case his mother needed him. Henry guided him gently, and they made their way to the small cafeteria at the far end of the hospital's ground floor. The unremarkable interior, rows of plastic chairs, faded posters about nutrition, did nothing to soothe Henry's roiling thoughts. He purchased 2 sandwiches, water bottles, and a juice box for Logan, but the boy only nibbled at his food. Henry glanced at him, recalling a conversation with a friend who once became a father unexpectedly. The friend had said, "Kids sense instability like a storm on the horizon. They'll stare at you, question everything, and you can't hide." Henry finally understood those words. Logan's gaze felt like a mirror reflecting Henry's own uncertainty. "Henry," Logan asked softly, "did my mom really tell you I'm your son? Or did I just mess everything up?" The question hurt more than Henry anticipated. He set down his untouched sandwich. "She told you to find me if something happened," he said, trying to keep his tone calm. "So no, you didn't mess anything up." He wanted to reassure Logan, to promise that everything would be all right, but he couldn't voice that certainty yet. They returned to the waiting area on the 2nd floor to find a different nurse, a middle-aged man with a kind face scribbling notes on a chart. When Henry inquired about the patient's status, the nurse said the doctors were still running tests, but that she was stable enough to remain in a regular room. Logan exhaled in relief, and Henry managed a half smile. "See," he said, "she's in good hands." A moment later, the nurse led them into a private room. The woman looked exhausted but slightly more alert. An IV drip and a monitor beeped steadily at her bedside. Logan rushed to her, clutching her hand with trembling fingers. She reached up, smoothing his hair, then shifted her gaze to Henry. At that moment, Henry realized her eyes were the same warm brown as Logan's. Her voice emerged in a raspy whisper. "I didn't know how else to reach you," she said. "When I got sick, I told him the truth." Henry approached, wrestling with the sheer volume of questions in his mind. "The truth?" he asked, keeping his tone gentle, though inside he was anything but calm. She nodded, drawing a shaky breath. "Yes," she managed. "I had a brief time with you years ago, but you got busy. I tried once to tell you, but..." She closed her eyes as though each word cost her tremendous energy. Logan's worried face darted between them, clearly sensing the tension. Henry frowned, scanning the woman's features for any recollection of a past encounter. He'd built his business forging countless contacts, traveling extensively for deals and conferences. Could she have been someone he crossed paths with during an overseas negotiation, a fleeting meeting at a corporate retreat? The confusion in Henry's eyes must have been obvious because she sighed weakly. "It was before you were known as a millionaire. A coughing fit cut her off. Logan instinctively placed a hand on his mother's shoulder, while Henry stepped closer. "Take your time," he said. She nodded, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I never wanted it to be like this," she murmured. "I raised him as long as I could on my own. Then things got complicated. I thought I could handle it, but I was wrong." Her voice cracked on that last word. Henry scanned the room, uncertain whether to push for more information now or wait until she had recovered. A swirl of emotions tore through him. Shock that she claimed to have raised his child alone, anger that he was never told, and an unexpected pang of guilt that he couldn't explain. No one prepared him for this sort of responsibility. A child, presumably his, looking up at him with unwavering trust. "Henry, can we stay with you?" Logan asked suddenly, voice filled with quiet desperation. The boy's plea shattered what little composure Henry had managed to maintain. He knelt by Logan's side, swallowing hard. "Yes," he said, though his mind reeled with the ramifications. "But first we need to get your mom better, okay?" Logan's expression flickered with relief. The doctors came in periodically, checking vitals and adjusting meds. Each passing hour gave Henry time to reflect. He stepped out to the hallway, calling a trusted assistant, Marjorie, who handled crisis management for his firm. He explained in broad terms that a personal emergency had arisen and he might be indisposed for several days. He sidestepped specifics. His corporation was accustomed to swift, well-reasoned directions, not half-formed explanations. Afterward, he arranged for a suite at the hospital's attached lodging area, determined to stay near mother and son until some clarity emerged. Late that night, Henry lingered by the large window at the end of the corridor, looking out at the city lights. Questions piled up. Could he truly be Logan's father? Had a fragment of his life slipped by without him noticing? If so, how should he move forward? Doubt whispered through his thoughts, yet so did a faint, surprising hope. As unprepared as he felt, a piece of him couldn't deny the peculiar bond forming between him and Logan, a bond forged in fear and necessity. Over the next 2 days, the mother's health stabilized. She still moved gingerly, coughing at intervals, but her doctor said she would recover with rest and proper medication. Logan never left her side for long, but during the lulls, he gravitated toward Henry, who found himself learning small things about the boy. His favorite color was green. He liked scrambled eggs but hated soggy cereal, and he had a penchant for reading whimsical adventure books. Henry also noticed how Logan's eyes sparkled whenever he talked about building things, like intricate Lego structures or random contraptions from cardboard boxes. The boy had imagination and drive, attributes Henry recognized in himself. Finally, on a chilly morning, Henry and Logan's mother found themselves alone. Logan had stepped out with a nurse to grab a snack. Henry took a seat by the bed, resisting the urge to fidget. A band of sunlight fell through the window, highlighting the lines of exhaustion on her face. "I was waiting for the right moment," she began, voice still raspy but clearer. "Then money got tight. I moved from place to place. I never settled." Her eyes brimmed with regret. "I tried to keep Logan safe. He asked about you more and more after he found an old article about your company. I kept telling him it wasn't the right time." Henry listened, trying to piece together the puzzle. He wondered if a paternity test would clear the haze of doubt swirling in his mind. He wasn't a man who accepted life-altering declarations without proof. Yet the fleeting guilt he felt each time he saw Logan's face suggested the truth might be simpler than a test. "Why now?" he asked gently. "Why come to me this way?" She sighed, letting a tear escape. "I didn't choose for this to happen in a hotel lobby, you know," she said. "I got too sick, too fast. Logan was scared. I told him the only name that ever mattered." The quiet sincerity in her words tugged at something deep inside Henry. He wanted to be angry at the lost years, the secrecy, the chaos, but seeing how frail she was muted his indignation. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes filled with an odd mix of resignation and hope. "Don't abandon him," she whispered, voice trembling. "I know it's so sudden, but he's a good kid, Henry. He deserves more than I can give right now." Henry slowly nodded, feeling the gravity of that request seep into his bones. "I'll make sure he's safe," he promised, surprising himself with how certain he sounded. Before he could say more, Logan appeared in the doorway, a plastic cup of applesauce in hand. He paused, reading the somber expressions. A hint of concern flitted across his features. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, stepping forward. She mustered a weary smile. "I'm all right," she assured him. "Just talking with your—" She paused, meeting Henry's gaze, then turned to Logan. "Just talking with Henry about the future." Logan blinked. "Our future?" he asked, voice tentative. Henry stood, crossing over to ruffle the boy's hair gently. "Yes," he replied, even if he couldn't fully grasp what that future entailed. Logan gave a small nod, seemingly relieved. The ring of Henry's phone cut through the quiet moment. He excused himself to take the call, heart pounding with the realization that everything in his life had changed in the span of days. As he stepped into the hallway, Henry glanced back at Logan, who was helping his mother open the applesauce. A swirl of protectiveness and responsibility ignited in Henry's chest. He might not have asked for this situation, but it had found him all the same. His empire, his millions, his carefully curated life. None of it felt as real or pressing as the sight of that child and his mother. He wasn't sure how to proceed, only that he needed to, for Logan, and maybe even for himself. Henry pressed the phone to his ear, his gaze drifting toward the hospital room where Logan and his mother remained. He tried to steady his breathing, but the swirl of recent events made it difficult to focus. On the other end of the line, Marjorie, his unflappable assistant, spoke in calm, clipped tones. She updated him on a series of pressing company matters, a postponed investors meeting, a client demanding a personal call, a newly scheduled interview with a major news outlet. Henry knew he couldn't ignore his business obligations forever, but at that moment none of it felt as urgent as what was unfolding in the hospital. "Delegate everything you can," he said into the phone, keeping his voice quiet. "Reschedule what isn't critical. If it's absolutely urgent, you let me know." Marjorie, accustomed to his typically hands-on approach, hesitated before agreeing. "Are you sure you won't need me to come by?" she asked. Henry closed his eyes, picturing the mountain of tasks piling up at his office. "No," he said finally. "I'll handle things from here for now. Just keep the corporate fires under control." He ended the call, exhaling as though he'd held his breath for too long. His entire world had been meticulously arranged around being available for every crisis, every pivot in the tech market, every shift in consumer sentiment. Suddenly, all of that felt secondary. He slipped the phone into his pocket and returned to the doorway, pausing when he saw Logan and his mother quietly talking. Logan's small hand rested on the bed railing, his mother brushing a stray hair from his forehead. They both glanced up when Henry entered. The woman offered a wan smile. "Is everything okay with work?" she asked gently. Henry nodded, though the tension in his eyes told a more complicated story. "I'm taking some time," he said simply. Logan tugged at the edge of his mother's sheet, looking anxious. "Mom, will you come home with us when you get out?" The question landed in the room like a fragile balloon, too delicate to jostle. She reached for Logan's hand, threading her fingers through his. "Let's get me healed up first," she murmured. "We can figure out the rest when I'm stronger." Henry remained by the chair, grappling with the significance of the boy's words. "Come home with us." No one had asked Henry whether he even had a home suitable for a child, let alone a woman he hardly knew anymore. He felt a flicker of guilt for thinking of logistical details when the boy and his mother were vulnerable, yet life had taught him that ignoring practicalities could lead to disaster. He decided to approach the matter gently. "You'll have a place to rest and recover," he said. "I can arrange anything you need, medical care, therapy sessions, whatever it takes." She gave him a small nod of thanks, her eyes reflecting a quiet resignation. It was clear she was unaccustomed to relying on anyone. A few days passed in a tense but steady pattern. Doctors monitored her condition closely, adjusting antibiotics and running tests. Logan, worried as ever, rarely left the bedside except to stretch his legs or retrieve snacks. Henry maneuvered around the hospital's schedule, conducting occasional conference calls in a cramped corner of the hallway, stepping away only when absolutely necessary. Each time he ended a call, he found himself pulled back to Logan, pulled back to the boy's wide eyes and uncertain questions. The child needed guidance, and Henry was the only one standing there to provide it, whether or not he felt equipped for the role. One afternoon, when the sun cast long rectangles of light across the hospital floor, a nurse suggested that Henry take Logan for a brief walk outside. "He's been cooped up here for days," she said kindly. "It might be good for him and for you." Henry agreed. He led Logan out of the hospital and onto a small courtyard dotted with trees and benches. The city's muffled roar came from beyond the tall fence. Logan looked around, inhaling fresh air as though he hadn't breathed it in ages. They sat on a bench under a spindly oak tree that had begun shedding crisp autumn leaves. Logan fiddled with a twig, occasionally looking up at Henry with an expression that shifted from curiosity to fear and back again. "When I go back to school, will I have to live somewhere else?" he asked. "Like a place for kids who don't have dads?" His voice shook, revealing just how much uncertainty simmered beneath his composed exterior. Henry's heart constricted. He realized Logan might have been bracing for rejection the entire time, dreading that Henry would leave the moment his mother improved. Slowly, Henry placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're not going to live anywhere except where you feel safe," he said. "I'm not abandoning you, Logan, no matter what happens." He surprised himself with the sureness in his tone. Logan swallowed hard, nodding. His expression wavered as though he was torn between believing Henry's words and clinging to his long-standing instinct that people disappear. A gentle breeze rattled the few leaves still clinging to the branches overhead. Henry surveyed the courtyard, taking in the sight of other families strolling the footpaths, some pushing wheelchairs, some simply walking slowly, supporting frail loved ones. He marveled at how easily he'd once believed his success rendered him invulnerable. This place reminded him that no amount of money or status could shield you from life's unpredictabilities. Logan broke the silence. "Did you ever want a family?" The question surprised Henry. His first impulse was to sidestep it. He wasn't ready to share the complexities of his life with a 7-year-old. Yet the candid earnestness in Logan's eyes nudged him toward honesty. "I thought I did," Henry said carefully, "but I was always busy, traveling, working, trying to build something. I guess I never made the space in my life for anyone else." The confession weighed on him even as it left his mouth. "But maybe I was wrong." Logan studied Henry, absorbing the admission. He didn't respond, but something in his posture softened. A few minutes later, they headed back inside, where Logan's mother awaited with a tired smile. She looked at them with a yearning in her eyes, as though wishing she could join them outdoors. "How was your walk?" she asked, voice raspy. Logan shrugged, scrunching his nose in that way children do when they're not sure what else to say. "It was okay," he managed. "Henry said he's not leaving." The mother's gaze flickered toward Henry, gratitude and lingering uncertainty weaving through her expression. "Doc says I might be able to leave in a few days," she said. "I'll need medication and follow-up visits, but at least I'll be out of here." Her voice trembled with relief, but Henry could see anxiety lurking beneath. She'd have nowhere to go unless he helped. He decided to address it straightforwardly. "I'm thinking you and Logan can stay at my apartment," he said, swallowing the nerves that threatened to tighten his throat. "At least for a little while. I have enough space for you to rest, and it's near good medical facilities." She stared at him, a flicker of pride passing over her face before it crumpled under the weight of her situation. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly, as though scared to say yes. Logan looked between them, hope lighting his features. Henry nodded. "I am. I can set up a spare room for each of you. We'll figure out the details as we go." That evening, Henry found himself in a swirl of logistics, arranging for a private nurse to check on Logan's mother once she was discharged, ensuring his home had appropriate supplies, speaking to a housekeeper about preparing the apartment for unexpected guests. He caught himself frowning at every mention of the word guest. They were more than that, weren't they? His thoughts strayed to the question of paternity. The more time he spent with Logan, the more plausible it seemed that the boy was indeed his son. But Henry was a man who valued evidence. He reached for his phone and dialed a contact he seldom used, an old friend in the medical field who discreetly handled delicate requests. Within minutes, he arranged for a private DNA test. If Logan's mother had no objections, they'd confirm the boy's parentage. As open as Henry's heart felt, he also recognized the need for absolute clarity, especially if he was to protect Logan from the potential chaos of rumor or misunderstanding. After finalizing these details, Henry wandered to the hospital's small chapel, a non-denominational space often used by those seeking a quiet sanctuary. The dim lights reflected off polished pews, and a hush surrounded him. He wasn't traditionally religious, but the calm was appealing. Standing alone, he allowed himself to reflect on the swirl of coincidences and revelations that had led him here. A single chance encounter years ago apparently resulted in a child. That child was now looking to him for stability, for hope. Could Henry truly rise to that challenge? An echo of his father's voice drifted up from memory. His father, who had once told Henry he'd never amount to anything unless he learned to keep his focus on achievements. "Family slows you down," his father used to say. "You need your edge to make it in this world." Henry remembered how fervently he once believed that, building his empire out of sheer determination, ignoring any messy, unpredictable entanglements. But as he pictured Logan's anxious eyes, he wondered if all those achievements mattered if he failed to be there for a boy who might be his own flesh and blood. He returned to the ward. The corridor lights dimmed for the night. Logan's mother had dozed off, and Logan himself sat slouched in a chair, fighting heavy eyelids. Henry guided him gently, motioning for him to rest in the recliner by his mother's bed. The boy nodded, murmuring half-formed thanks. Henry lingered, watching them both, his heart tight with a mix of dread and determination. Whatever else happened, he would not walk away. Before leaving for his own lodging room, he paused to scribble a note on his phone, reminding himself to talk to Logan's mother about the DNA test. Then he slipped the device in his pocket and glanced once more into that hospital room. Logan's mother stirred, blinking at him. He offered a small smile of reassurance, though an ocean of uncertainty still stretched out before them. She gave a faint nod, as though acknowledging that for better or worse, they were now in this together. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like, and share with friends. Henry woke the next morning to the muffled clang of metal carts in the hospital corridor. He'd spent the night in a small lodging room the hospital offered for relatives of patients, but he hadn't truly rested. As soon as the first light filtered through the blinds, he dressed and made his way back to check on Logan and his mother. He found them in the same quiet arrangement as before, Logan curled up in the recliner and his mother stirring restlessly in the bed. The doctors were pleased with her progress, though they reminded her that she would need steady follow-up. She managed a warm smile when Henry approached, and Logan's face lit up just a little. Henry set down 2 cups of hot chocolate he'd picked up from a nearby cafe. One was for Logan, but the boy's mother accepted it gratefully, hands trembling around the paper cup as though unused to kindness. Henry watched her with a mixture of relief and apprehension, hoping the simple comforts might ease the undercurrent of anxiety that still lingered. That afternoon, as the doctors finalized her release paperwork, Henry stepped outside the room, phone in hand. He had arranged for a private nurse to visit regularly, ensuring medicine and checkups. He also made calls to set up a comfortable environment at his apartment. He needed extra bedding, fresh groceries, and any specialized medical equipment that could help her transition. With each call, he felt an odd pang of responsibility that went beyond philanthropic gestures. This was personal, his life intersecting with theirs in a way he never could have anticipated. When the discharge was complete, the 3 of them left the hospital. Logan's mother moved slowly, leaning on a cane the doctors had provided for stability. She insisted she could manage without it, but Henry and Logan both persuaded her not to push too hard. Outside, the sky was a crisp blue, and city noises pulsed from every corner. A sleek black car waited at the curb, courtesy of Henry's driver. He held the door open as Logan helped his mother ease into the back seat. Henry slid in beside them, a silent swirl of emotions churning in his chest. During the ride, Henry studied the passing skyscrapers. He spotted the towering headquarters of his tech company, a building whose construction he had overseen personally. Normally, he felt pride whenever he glimpsed it through the cityscape. Today, it barely registered as more than a passing blur. His thoughts kept drifting to the DNA test appointment he'd scheduled for the following afternoon. He had informed Logan's mother gently, and though her lips thinned, she agreed that clarity was necessary. Logan had asked a few questions, mostly practical. Did it hurt? Would it take long? Henry had given him calm, truthful answers. If the test confirmed what seemed increasingly likely, the boy was his. Once they reached Henry's apartment building, a doorman rushed forward to greet them. The lobby's vaulted ceiling and polished floors exuded quiet opulence, but Henry felt a twinge of discomfort as he guided Logan and his mother across the marble tiles. He had built his life in sleek efficiency, never imagining these halls might echo with a child's footsteps. Logan's eyes widened at the ornate elevator with its brass fixtures, and Henry silently vowed to strip away any sense of intimidation. This needed to be their safe space, at least for as long as they needed it. They emerged on the 20th floor, stepping directly into Henry's penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city's skyline, and an open floor plan extended from a modern kitchen to a sunken living area. Logan's mother paused, the cane tapping lightly on polished wood while Logan stood with his backpack slung over one shoulder. "This place is huge," the boy breathed. Henry offered him a small smile, though he couldn't help noticing how the apartment suddenly felt too pristine, too lifeless. Maybe it had always been that way, and he'd just never noticed. "I'll show you your rooms," Henry said quietly, leading them down a short corridor. He stopped at a guest suite adorned with neutral decor, a queen-sized bed, plush carpeting, a wide window overlooking the city. "This can be yours," he told Logan's mother, gesturing for her to step inside. She nodded gratefully, lowering herself onto the bed with a small sigh. Logan lingered in the doorway, eyes darting from the ceiling to the furniture. Henry placed a hand on the boy's back. "You, my friend, get the one across the hall. It's smaller, but we can fix it up however you like." Logan trotted after Henry, peering into a cozier room with a single bed and a desk by the window. A bookshelf, empty of any reading material, stood against one wall. "We'll get books," Henry said, noticing the boy's curious glance. "And if you want, we can add some posters, maybe a little couch. Whatever makes you feel at home." Logan's expression flickered with cautious excitement. "Thanks," he murmured, shifting from one foot to the other. "I've never had my own room before." The comment sliced through Henry's chest, a reminder of how foreign stability was to the boy. They spent the remainder of the afternoon settling in. Henry enlisted the help of a housekeeper, who arrived with fresh linens and a stock of groceries. The woman offered warm smiles to Logan's mother, helping her arrange basic toiletries in the guest bathroom. Meanwhile, Henry escorted Logan around the apartment, showing him the laundry area, the media room, and a small balcony that overlooked the city's hustle. Logan gawked at the view, pressing his palms to the glass. "Feels like I'm in a movie," he whispered, as though worried about speaking too loudly. By early evening, Henry ordered takeout from a nearby restaurant famed for hearty soups and freshly baked bread. He reasoned that a warm meal might comfort Logan's mother as she adapted to her new environment. They ate in the living room, perched around a low-glass coffee table, because Henry realized, somewhat awkwardly, that his formal dining area might feel too stiff for them. Logan's mother sipped at her soup, offering occasional compliments on the taste, though she still looked fragile. Logan sat cross-legged on the carpet, eagerly devouring a grilled cheese sandwich. Henry watched them both, torn between relief that they were here under his roof and guilt that it had taken so long for him to step into their lives. As the night wore on, Henry faced the conversation he'd been dreading. He joined Logan's mother in the guest suite, waiting until Logan was preoccupied with a children's program on TV. She sat propped against a few pillows, the lamp casting soft shadows across her face. "About the test," Henry began, voice measured. "I just want you to know, if it confirms that Logan is mine, I'm all in. We'll figure out next steps together." She studied him for a moment, eyes glinting with unshed tears. "I appreciate that," she said. "I don't want Logan to feel uncertain. He's already been through enough." Henry exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "No matter the outcome," he said, "I'm here to help you recover. And if Logan is my son, I'll be here for him too, in every way possible." The intensity of his own statement surprised him, but the conviction in his words felt genuine, fueled by days of seeing how quickly life could shift under one's feet. She nodded, letting her eyes close briefly as though the strain of living in limbo was wearing her thin. "I was always scared," she admitted softly. "Scared you'd reject him if you knew, or that we'd disrupt your life and you'd resent us." Henry placed a tentative hand on the edge of the bed. "I can't resent him," he confessed. "Every time I look at Logan, I see a reflection of my own determination. It's like he's already more fearless than I ever was." Her expression softened and the corners of her lips curved upward, a faint smile that hinted at relief. Outside the room, they heard a burst of laughter, Logan reacting to something on the television. For a moment, the tension ebbed. Even in this strange, uncertain chapter, a flicker of warmth brightened the space. Henry let her rest, retreating to the living room to find Logan beaming at a cartoon dog tumbling across the screen. The boy's laughter was infectious, but it carried a wistfulness Henry couldn't ignore. He settled beside Logan on the couch, sharing in a moment of playful banter about the show's silliness. Logan eventually yawned, eyes drooping, so Henry led him to his new bedroom. He helped the boy pull back the covers, then watched as Logan nestled in, looking tiny against the plush pillows. Henry flicked off the overhead light, leaving only a soft lamp aglow. "You know," Logan said sleepily, "this doesn't feel real, like maybe I'll wake up and be somewhere else." Henry's heart gave a small twist. "You're safe here," he said, gently smoothing the blankets. "And tomorrow we'll go together for that test. One step at a time, okay?" The boy nodded, already half asleep, as Henry quietly exited the room. Padding down the hallway, he passed the large windows that revealed a sea of city lights. Inside him, a swirl of anxiety, hope, and cautious determination brewed. Perhaps he didn't fully understand the role of a father. Perhaps he'd always valued control too much to allow for the chaos of genuine human connection. But now, amid the hush of his upscale penthouse, Henry sensed that his carefully curated life was expanding to include two people who needed him. And maybe he needed them too. Before bed, he checked on Logan's mother one last time, finding her in a light doze. He then retreated to his own suite, unclasping the cufflinks he'd forgotten to remove earlier. Sliding them into a drawer, he finally acknowledged what he'd refused to say out loud. He wanted Logan to be his son. All the logic in the world couldn't quell that quiet wish. And he would see it through, regardless of the test's verdict, because something irrevocable had shifted inside him. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Morning arrived with a subdued hush in Henry's penthouse. Sunlight crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the modern furniture and reflecting off the glass tables. Henry had slept fitfully, his thoughts cycling back to the upcoming DNA test that would either confirm or dismantle his growing conviction that Logan was indeed his son. He rose early, dressing in casual slacks and a collared shirt, determined not to make the day more intimidating for Logan than it already would be. While tying his shoelaces, he replayed the conversation from the previous night, recalling Logan's quiet declaration that he'd never had his own room. That small detail weighed on Henry's heart, intensifying his resolve to be present no matter what the results revealed. In the guest suite, Logan's mother was awake but still resting. Through the half-open doorway, Henry could see her propped against pillows, gingerly turning the pages of a magazine. She looked up when she noticed him, and their eyes met in a brief moment of mutual understanding. They'd come far in just a few days. She, grappling with her health, and lingering guilt for not contacting him sooner. He, attempting to reconcile his carefully curated life with a boy's immediate needs. A faint smile tugged at the corners of her mouth, though shadows lingered in her gaze. Logan appeared from his room, wearing fresh clothes that Henry had arranged for him. The boy's hair stuck up at odd angles, suggesting he'd slept hard. "You ready?" Henry asked gently, setting a hand on Logan's shoulder. Logan shrugged, biting the inside of his cheek. "I guess," he replied. Despite the boy's attempt at nonchalance, Henry sensed his nerves. The DNA test represented more than mere science. It was a glimpse into an entirely different future. Henry tried to exude calm, even though a coil of anticipation tightened in his own stomach. He reminded himself that, results aside, he had already decided to stay. They ate a quick breakfast, toast for Logan's mother, cereal for the boy, and coffee for Henry, before heading out. The private clinic was only a short drive away, perched on the quieter side of the city. Henry wanted to avoid the sprawling chaos of large hospitals, preferring privacy to keep speculation at bay. He guided Logan's mother into the waiting car, careful to support her as she lowered herself onto the seat. Logan slid in beside her, fiddling with the hem of his shirt, eyes darting to Henry for reassurance. The soft purr of the engine underscored their silence as the driver navigated early traffic. The clinic itself was discreet, with tinted glass doors and a sparse reception area. A receptionist greeted them with professional courtesy, double-checking their appointment. She led them to a private room, where a nurse explained the process. A simple swab of the mouth, no needles involved. Logan exhaled in relief at the lack of needles, and Henry offered him an encouraging nod. They proceeded quickly. Logan and Henry each had a sample taken, while Logan's mother provided additional information about the child's medical history. Henry noticed her hands trembling, but said nothing, worried that any verbal acknowledgement might intensify her guilt. Once the samples were in the lab's possession, the waiting began. The nurse told them it would take a few days to receive definitive results. They stepped back out into the sunshine, each of them carrying tension in different ways. Logan stared at the sidewalk, kicking at a stray pebble, and Henry couldn't help placing a hand gently on the boy's back. "Let's go get some lunch," he offered, hoping food might serve as a welcome distraction. Logan nodded, and his mother, leaning on the cane, managed a quiet smile of agreement. They ended up at a small cafe that Henry used to frequent with business associates. Its polished wooden floors and bright window seating gave it an unassuming charm. He guided them to a table in the corner. The hostess, catching sight of Henry, gave a polite dip of her head, perhaps recalling him from past visits when he'd discussed mergers and expansions over espresso. Now, his companions were a woman fighting exhaustion and a boy glancing nervously at the menu. Henry found himself appreciating the cafe's warmth in a way he never had before. They ordered sandwiches and soup, plus a fruit salad for Logan. Conversation was tentative, focusing on everyday pleasantries. Logan fiddled with a straw wrapper, and Henry racked his brain for a topic that might lighten the mood. "So," he said, clearing his throat, "did you see that cartoon you liked on again last night?" Logan nodded, a slight grin peeking through. "Mom said I could watch the rerun. It's funny. The dog keeps trying to drive a bus." The absurd image made Henry chuckle. Even Logan's mother cracked a small laugh, then coughed lightly. A wave of relief passed through Henry as he realized that, for a fleeting moment, they felt almost like a family sharing an ordinary lunch rather than strangers bound by unconfirmed bonds. Back at the penthouse, Logan's mother settled into a recliner by the window, soaking in afternoon sunlight. Henry offered her herbal tea, which she sipped gratefully. Logan curled up in a nearby armchair with a book Henry had picked up for him, a children's fantasy about dragons and hidden kingdoms. Henry busied himself checking messages on his phone, noticing a handful of urgent requests from his executives. He typed succinct replies, delegating tasks, all while keeping one eye on Logan and his mother. Balancing these two worlds, corporate and personal, felt unfamiliar but strangely grounding. He realized that while his presence in the office had once felt indispensable, his presence here mattered far more. Late in the afternoon, Logan's mother dozed off, the recliner tilted back. Henry signaled for Logan to join him in the kitchen, where the boy hopped onto a bar stool. "Do you like spaghetti?" Henry asked, rummaging through the refrigerator. Logan shrugged, but his eyes brightened. "Sure, I haven't had homemade spaghetti in a long time." Henry blinked, glancing at the half-empty pantry. He normally didn't cook. Most of his meals were catered or eaten out. Still, the idea of preparing something comforting appealed to him. The two of them rummaged for pasta, tomato sauce, and seasonings. Henry showed Logan how to turn on the stove's gas range carefully, checking each knob. Together, they stirred the sauce and dropped noodles into boiling water. Logan's face lit up as Henry allowed him to sprinkle in dried basil and a bit of pepper. The boy sniffed at the fragrant steam, a contented smile forming on his lips. Henry marveled at how these simple, mundane tasks could feel so momentous. They took their time, enjoying the rhythmic process, occasionally laughing when tomato sauce spattered across the stovetop. By early evening, dinner was ready. They beckoned Logan's mother to the table, where a modest arrangement of plates and silverware awaited. She appeared touched by the gesture. The three of them sat down, steam rising from fresh spaghetti. Logan twirled noodles around his fork with care, taking his first bite. His eyes widened and he mumbled through a mouthful, "This is good." Henry, startled by his own sense of accomplishment, let out a soft laugh. "I'm glad you think so," he said, relieved that their impromptu cooking session had turned into a success rather than a fiasco. After dinner, Henry motioned for Logan to grab his shoes. They walked a short distance to the building's rooftop garden, a tucked-away spot with potted shrubs and a few benches, primarily used by residents seeking a break from city life. Overhead, the sky blushed with dusk, streaks of orange and pink reflecting off skyscraper windows. Henry led Logan to the edge where a safety railing offered a sweeping panorama of the city below. For a while they simply stood there, the breeze ruffling their hair, the hum of traffic far beneath them. "Do you think we'll know soon?" Logan asked, voice carrying more apprehension than excitement. Henry knew he meant the test results. He placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "In a few days they'll call," he said. "But remember what I told you. No matter what, I'm not going anywhere." Logan nodded, as if that promise needed to be reiterated until it felt real. Beneath the waning daylight, they shared a moment of silence, an unspoken alliance forming between them. When they went back inside, Logan ventured off to read, and Henry found Logan's mother still in the recliner, eyes closed. Her breathing was steady but shallow, a reminder of her recent struggles. He draped a light blanket over her legs, mindful of not disturbing her rest. Then he retreated to his private study, a space lined with sleek shelves, modern art, and an imposing desk. Ordinarily, he would sit there finalizing deals or strategizing company objectives. Tonight, he stared at a blinking cursor on his laptop, considering the possibility that everything he'd built might pale in comparison to a single child's well-being. A sudden surge of energy propelled him to confirm the next medical appointments for Logan's mother. He jotted down notes, schedules, contact details. He wanted to ensure her recovery continued uninterrupted. He wanted to safeguard Logan's newfound sense of safety. And he wanted, though he hardly dared admit it, the test results to affirm what his heart already suspected. The evening winded down gently. Logan disappeared into his room, brushing his teeth without fuss, and Henry checked in briefly, good nights passing between them like quiet reassurance. When the penthouse lights dimmed, Henry lingered in the living area, gazing through the glass walls at the sweeping city. Tomorrow would bring new questions, and in a matter of days, the call from the lab would come. He reminded himself that he had made a promise and that no test outcome could erase the bond growing in that apartment, yet the unknown still tugged at him, prodding the corners of his mind with uncertainties about fatherhood, family, and the structures he had so carefully erected around his life. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like, and share with friends. 2 mornings later, Henry found himself pacing near the penthouse windows, phone in hand, waiting for the lab to call with the test results. Logan had gone with his mother to a routine checkup that morning, accompanied by the private nurse Henry had hired. The emptiness of the apartment emphasized Henry's restlessness. He couldn't focus on the work emails piling up in his inbox, nor the half-finished proposals waiting on his laptop. All he could think about was the possibility that by day's end, he might confirm what his heart already suspected. Logan was his son. Everything felt suspended again. Determined to break the tension, Henry forced himself to tidy up the living area. He collected stray magazines, adjusted cushions on the couch, and watered a potted fern he had mostly ignored until now. Each small task gave him something concrete to do, though it did little to settle his nerves. The hush of the penthouse felt overwhelming, a reminder that the child who had brought life into these once sterile rooms was absent. As he wiped the spotless kitchen countertop, Henry paused to stare at his phone again, wondering if the lab might call earlier than promised. Nothing felt simple. Eventually, the elevator chimed, breaking the silent vigil. Henry hurried to the foyer just as Logan's mother stepped out, leaning on her cane with Logan trailing behind. The private nurse gave a polite nod, then left quietly. Logan offered Henry a small smile. He held a white envelope in his hand, eyes brimming with curiosity. The envelope bore the clinic's logo in the corner, and Henry's stomach tightened. He realized that while he'd been waiting for a phone call, they must have delivered the results by courier. In that instant, the entire penthouse seemed to hold its breath. Everything hinged. Henry gestured for them to follow him into the living room, where they settled on the couch. The envelope felt heavier than it looked when Logan pressed it into Henry's hands. Logan's mother watched, her expression revealing both fear and hope. Henry's heart pounded as he carefully peeled back the seal. His gaze flicked to Logan, who knotted his fingers together, bracing for the truth. Slowly, Henry pulled out the document, scanning the typed lines. The result was unequivocal. Henry was indeed Logan's biological father. A wave of emotion crashed over him, leaving no room for doubt or denial. Finally. For a moment, the room was silent except for Logan's mother's uneven breathing. Logan himself stared at Henry, searching his face for signs of anger or relief. Henry forced himself to meet the boy's gaze. Surprise, joy, anxiety, each contended for space in Henry's chest. But above all, he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility and belonging. "It's true," he whispered, voice hoarse with emotion. Logan's eyes brimmed with tears, and Henry opened his arms in a hesitant invitation. Logan bolted forward, colliding against Henry in an embrace that felt both raw and profoundly comforting. Nothing else mattered anymore. Not then. Logan's mother let out a long, trembling exhale. Tears clung to her lashes, though she kept her composure. Carefully, Henry released Logan and reached for her hand. The remorse in her eyes was stark. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier," she began, her voice low. "I was afraid you'd turn us away. And when my health got worse, I couldn't risk leaving Logan with no one." Henry squeezed her fingers gently, acknowledging both her fear and her love. "We can't change the past," he said quietly, "but we can decide what happens next. Let's figure it out together. Tonight." That afternoon, Henry canceled the remainder of his scheduled calls, determined to spend time with Logan and his mother. He phoned Marjorie, instructing her to handle pressing tasks and forward only the most urgent matters. Then he took both Logan and his mother on a short drive around the city. He wanted to show them places that mattered to him: a quiet park by the waterfront, an old bookstore he'd frequented in his younger days. Logan stared out the window, wide-eyed at the tall buildings and bustling streets, while his mother occasionally smiled at Henry's subdued enthusiasm. The day felt hopeful. Back at the penthouse, the atmosphere had shifted. They carried an unspoken understanding that everything was different now. Henry was truly Logan's father. As evening approached, the three of them prepared dinner together. Logan insisted on helping chop vegetables, carefully mimicking the technique Henry had shown him before. His mother, still recovering, measured out ingredients from her seat at the kitchen island. The conversation was light and tentative, centered on mundane details of the day. Yet beneath that surface lay a blossoming sense of unity. By the time the meal was ready, they were exchanging small smiles as if testing bonds. After dinner, while Logan's mother rested, Henry and Logan strolled out to the balcony. City lights twinkled in the distance, headlights moving like fireflies across endless avenues. Logan leaned against the railing, brimming with questions. "Are you going to teach me stuff?" he asked abruptly. Henry chuckled, though his heart clenched a bit. "Sure. What do you want to learn?" Logan shrugged. "I don't know. Building things, maybe math, or even business. You're really good at that." Henry ruffled Logan's hair, marveling at how easily the boy had woven himself into his life. "We'll learn together," he promised. "The future." Later, when Logan had finally gone to sleep, Henry joined the boy's mother in the living room. She appeared lost in thought, fingers tracing the rim of a lukewarm teacup. Henry settled beside her, unsure if words could capture the cascade of emotions they both felt. "I never wanted to hide him from you forever," she confessed, voice trembling. "When we first met, I saw how driven you were. I worried you'd resent us or think we were a burden." Henry lifted a hand, gently stilling hers. "I've made mistakes too," he said. "But we have this chance now." She placed the cup aside. "I'm trying to adjust to the idea that we aren't alone anymore. My health is improving, but some days are still hard." Her voice faltered. Henry let silence stretch for a moment, acknowledging the weight of her words. Finally, he spoke. "You don't have to face it alone. Logan and I are here, and that means something." Her eyes glimmered with gratitude, relief, and unspoken worries. "I know," she whispered. They lapsed into a companionable hush, the city's dim glow shining through the windows. In their quiet acceptance, there was a tenderness neither had expected. In the days that followed, Henry threw himself into learning how to be a father. He showed Logan the basics of budgeting with an app on a spare tablet, amusing the boy with pie charts of imaginary expenses. He taught him how to tie a simpler knot on his shoelaces, reminding Logan that independence came from small skills practiced daily. Logan's mother continued to recover, taking short walks along the penthouse corridor with Henry's assistance. Sometimes she would watch Henry and Logan from the kitchen, a faint smile playing on her lips as if she too was discovering new purpose. One crisp morning, Henry woke to find Logan already in the living room, scribbling on a notepad. When he asked what the boy was doing, Logan grinned. "I'm making a list of things I want to learn with you." Henry's chest tightened. It struck him how deeply Logan yearned for stability, guidance, and a parent's unwavering presence. Carefully, Henry ruffled the boy's hair and sat beside him on the couch. Outside, sunlight bathed the city in a golden glow, a silent testament to renewal. The future stretched out in unknown paths, but in that moment, they were forging hope together. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like, and share with friends. Henry sat quietly at the small dining table, sipping black coffee and gazing at the handwritten list Logan had placed there earlier. In neat, blocky letters, the boy had outlined ideas for things to learn, with bullets for cooking, math games, building a model airplane, and even how to speak in front of people like Henry does. The last point made Henry's lips twitch into a faint smile. Public speaking was so tied to his professional life, presentations for investors, keynote addresses at tech summits. He'd never imagined sharing that skill with a wide-eyed child. But Logan's curiosity warmed Henry's heart. For the first time in many years, he felt that his achievements might matter on a more personal level. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the open living space where Logan's mother carefully walked the perimeter, working to rebuild her strength. She no longer needed the cane for every step, though she still kept it close. On the sofa, Logan sat cross-legged, flipping through a children's atlas that had arrived in the mail after Henry ordered several educational books. Logan's mother paused near the window, resting one hand on the glass, and murmured that she'd like to see the city beyond this penthouse vantage point as soon as she felt steady enough. Henry nodded with encouragement. It was important for her to regain a sense of normalcy. Over the past week, Henry had carefully balanced fatherhood with his CEO responsibilities, shifting meetings to virtual sessions whenever possible. Early morning teleconferences or late-night strategy reviews became the norm, leaving midday hours open for moments of discovery with Logan. Sometimes, Henry showed the boy the basics of a spreadsheet on a tablet, letting Logan punch in numbers and marvel at how the rows and columns automatically updated totals. Other times, they read a children's biography together, one that detailed the story of a young inventor who built small gadgets from household scraps. Logan asked endless questions about how inventions came to be and whether Henry had ever built anything outside his corporate ventures. Henry laughed and admitted that his building projects usually involved intangible products, apps, software, virtual interfaces. Still, Logan's enthusiasm for problem-solving excited him. One morning, while Logan's mother rested, Henry brought out a large cardboard box that once contained an office printer. He proposed they try to make something fun out of it, maybe a miniature fort or a pretend spaceship. Logan's face lit up, and for the next hour they cut flaps, taped edges, and added windows with markers. Logan decided it should be an exploration pod, decorated with drawn-on control panels. Henry found himself sprawled on the floor, marker in hand, sketching circles to look like dials. The smell of cardboard and permanent ink filled the air, stirring memories of Henry's own childhood, memories he realized he'd all but buried beneath years of unrelenting ambition. When Logan's mother woke from her nap and wandered out of the guest room, she let out a small laugh at the sight of them. "You've turned the living room into a space station," she teased, her eyes sparkling with genuine amusement. Henry shrugged with playful humility, then offered her a seat. "We still have room in here if you want to come aboard," he quipped, tapping the box that now bore a large sign reading, "Logan and Henry's Pod." Logan's mother glanced at it, emotion flickering across her features. It was a simple moment, yet it held a profound sense of belonging, the kind Henry once believed he didn't need. In the weeks since the DNA test had confirmed their bond, Henry noticed a steady shift in Logan. The boy still had moments of caution, especially whenever Henry stepped out for a business meeting, but Logan seemed more certain that Henry would return. His mother also showed improvements in health and spirit. She insisted on helping around the apartment, folding laundry or preparing a simple meal. Henry welcomed her assistance, though he worried she might overtax herself. He'd become attuned to the lines of fatigue that crept across her face whenever she stood too long. One evening, Henry returned from a key meeting with potential investors. Instead of charging straight to his study to check emails, he lingered in the living room, where Logan was sprawled on the carpet reading about airplanes. Logan glanced up. "Hey, you're back," he announced, half sitting up. Henry set down his briefcase and nodded. "Long day, but yes, I'm back." Logan's mother, perched on the couch, smiled warmly. "We saved you some dinner. Chicken and rice, nothing too fancy." Henry rubbed a hand over his tie, relieved he no longer had to schedule every conversation. He was realizing that these ordinary moments, hearing about Logan's day, thanking Logan's mother for the meal, gave him more peace than any business victory ever had. After dinner, Henry took Logan onto the balcony to stargaze. A small telescope, delivered by the same online store that sent the books, stood on a tripod. They aimed it at scattered constellations, with Henry fumbling to recall the names of the stars he hadn't studied since childhood. Logan peered through the lens, enthralled. Occasionally the boy turned, bouncing with excitement at some distant point of light. Henry found Logan's mother watching from the balcony door, leaning on the frame, her posture relaxed. She wore a half-smile that told Henry she was content to see them bond. Later, after Logan went to bed, she joined Henry on the balcony, the two of them sharing a rare moment of private conversation. "He's happier," she said softly, glancing at the empty telescope. "I was so afraid you'd resent him, or that he'd resent you." Henry shrugged, swallowing the lump that formed in his throat. "I think we both needed each other more than we realized." She reached out, brushing her fingers against his arm. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's more than I ever hoped." Henry felt warmth expand in his chest. He was unaccustomed to these quiet admissions, but they felt natural now. The busy city buzzed below them, unaware of the quiet transformations unfolding 20 floors above the streets. The following week, Henry decided it was time to introduce Logan and his mother to the outside world more fully. She was well enough for short excursions, and Logan needed an outlet beyond the walls of the penthouse. They started small, a short visit to a nearby bookstore, where Logan could browse the children's section, while Henry and his mother sipped coffee at the in-store cafe. Logan's face lit up at the sight of endless shelves. He ran his fingers along book spines, carefully choosing an adventure novel about explorers trekking through jungles. Henry's motherly companion eyed him, smiling with pride. She confessed softly that she used to read to him when he was very small, back when everything was uncertain and they moved too often for him to attend a steady school. Emboldened by the success of this outing, Henry arranged another day trip, driving them out to a botanical garden near the city's edge. The entire ride, Logan pressed his nose to the car window, mesmerized by the passing roads and greenery. Once there, they wandered through pathways lined with manicured flowers. Logan took photos on a small camera Henry had given him, snapping shots of bright blossoms and a tiny pond filled with koi fish. His mother, wearing comfortable shoes and leaning on the cane only lightly, commented on the fresh air and the myriad scents. Henry found himself inhaling deeply, as though breathing in more than just oxygen, perhaps relief, hope, or some intangible faith in the future. Despite the ease of these outings, Henry remained mindful that real life held challenges they hadn't yet confronted. Eventually, they would have to decide on schooling for Logan, finalize guardianship paperwork, and address the question of how Logan's mother fit into this evolving family unit. Henry understood that she might fear losing her place if he assumed a more formal parental role. He also acknowledged that a part of him worried about how to navigate co-parenting with someone he barely knew, beyond these recent weeks of crisis and healing. One evening, after Logan and his mother had retired to their rooms, Henry retreated to his study. He began drafting a plan for the next steps, enrolling Logan in a local school, ensuring his mother had health insurance coverage under Henry's resources, and consulting a lawyer about the legal aspects of fatherhood. He hesitated at the final bullet on his list. Secure official custody arrangement? That phrase felt clinical, stripped of the emotional nuance that had grown between them. Yet Henry couldn't ignore the necessity of legal clarity. He wanted to protect Logan, to ensure that neither bureaucracy nor surprise complications could uproot what they had started to build. The longer Henry worked on these documents, the more he realized how drastically his priorities had shifted. He found himself applying the same meticulous care to fatherhood as he once did to business negotiations. But with each typed sentence, he also recognized that parental love wasn't something to be hammered into contract clauses. These legal frameworks were a safety net, not a reflection of affection. Glancing at the clock, he closed his laptop, deciding to continue discussions in the morning. As he switched off the lights and made his way down the hushed corridor, he passed Logan's door. Through a thin slice of space, he saw a faint glow from a nightlight. The boy was asleep, sprawled with one arm hanging off the bed, the new adventure novel lying open. Henry lingered, feeling a wave of tenderness that both unnerved and gratified him. Returning to his own suite, he contemplated how swiftly life had flipped, from solitary nights in a silent penthouse to the daily hum of a child's laughter and a mother's quiet footsteps. He wasn't naive. Conflicts might arise, misunderstandings too, but for the first time, he believed he could face them with open arms rather than closed doors. He got ready for bed, shutting out the city's late-night glare, and slipped under the covers with an unaccustomed sense of peace. Tomorrow, new tasks beckoned. A swirl of guardianship logistics, finishing touches on a big business deal, and maybe some more time building cardboard contraptions with Logan. Henry closed his eyes, letting the future curl around him like a promise he had every intention to keep. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like, and share with friends. The next few days brought a flurry of small but important changes to the household. Henry's apartment gradually lost the feeling of a sterile showpiece as it absorbed the rhythms of daily family life. Logan's mother transitioned from using the cane full-time to steadying herself on the furniture or leaning briefly on Henry's arm. Logan, energized by the space and by his father's presence, filled the once quiet corners with chatter about planes, books, and half-formed ideas for invention projects. Even the housekeeper, normally precise and reserved, occasionally allowed a grin to slip when she saw them sprawled on the floor, constructing something out of cardboard scraps. One crisp morning, Henry set a small stack of documents on the kitchen island while Logan and his mother ate breakfast. Logan peered over curiously. "What's that?" he asked, mouth half full of scrambled eggs. Henry patted the boy's shoulder and gave his mother a tentative look. "Papers for your enrollment," he said. "I talked to a few local schools. We can visit a couple and see which one fits you best." He paused, unsure whether Logan would be excited or wary. School would be a massive adjustment for a child who'd never had a permanent address. Logan's mother shifted, a subtle trace of apprehension crossing her features. "He's never been in a formal school," she said softly. "We move too often. I tried to keep up with reading lessons, but it's been tough." Henry nodded, understanding how fleeting her stability must have been. "There's no rush," he said, keeping his voice soothing. "We'll get him the support he needs. I just want him to have options." Logan chewed thoughtfully, eyes darting from the papers to Henry. "Will the other kids think I'm weird because I'm older and haven't been in school?" he asked. Henry felt a small pang. Children could be quick to label differences in others. "We'll explain your situation to the teachers," he replied, trying to project calm. "And I'll make sure you have all the supplies you need. We'll figure it out step by step." "You're smart, Logan. You'll catch up." The boy's gaze lingered on the enrollment forms. Slowly, his shoulders relaxed, indicating a timid sort of acceptance. That afternoon, while Logan tried on a few new clothes for potential school uniforms, Henry accompanied his mother to another doctor's appointment. This time they ventured without the private nurse. She insisted she was strong enough. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee, and Henry found himself recalling the tense hours he'd spent at the hospital's corridors just weeks ago, uncertain of her fate. Now she walked into the examination area with resolve, head held high. Henry thumbed through emails on his phone until she emerged, a thin smile on her face. "The doctor says I'm doing well," she announced. "A bit more rest and therapy, but I'm basically out of the woods." Relief washed over Henry, and he reached out to lightly squeeze her hand. "I'm glad," he murmured. They left the clinic together, the sun glinting off glass buildings around them. On the drive home, she rested her head against the seat's cushion, watching the city pass by. "You know," she began quietly, "I think about how much I kept from you. What if I had come to you sooner? If Logan had known stability earlier?" Henry inhaled, steadying himself. He'd asked himself similar questions in the solitude of his thoughts. "We can't change the past," he said, turning to look at her. "But what matters is that we're here now, trying to give him and ourselves something better." That evening, Henry's assistant, Marjorie, stopped by to finalize a few urgent contracts Henry had postponed. She was efficient and discreet, keeping her gaze focused on the documents rather than prying into Henry's personal circumstances. Still, she did allow herself one curious glance when Logan dashed through the living room, waving a partially assembled model plane. Henry cleared his throat, offering Marjorie an apologetic smile. "This is Logan," he said by way of explanation, though he didn't delve deeper. Marjorie nodded politely, looking amused rather than scandalized. Once Marjorie left, Logan pounced on Henry with the model plane in hand. "Look, I glued the wings, but they keep slipping." Henry examined the crooked wings and gently showed Logan how to apply a more even layer of adhesive. They worked together at the dining table, chatting in low voices about aerodynamics, Henry's limited knowledge blending with Logan's enthusiastic questions. Across the room, Logan's mother watched, her eyes reflecting quiet gratitude at the sight of her son forging a bond she had once believed impossible. After the model plane was stable and set aside to dry, Logan's mother excused herself to rest, leaving the two of them alone. Henry caught a glimpse of paperwork on the kitchen island, reminding him of the school visits they'd arranged for the next day. His mind drifted to the challenge of assimilating Logan into a system that prized continuity and routine. "Are you nervous?" Henry asked, careful to keep his tone supportive. Logan nodded. "A little," he admitted. "What if I don't fit in?" Henry crouched so he was eye level with his son. "You fit in wherever you decide to," he said gently. "But if it's too overwhelming, we'll figure out a different approach. Maybe a smaller class or a tutor until you're ready. You're not alone, okay?" Logan's cheeks tinged pink, and he nodded, biting his lip. He seemed relieved to know he had a say in how this unfolded. That night, Henry slept lightly, his mind swirling with visions of classroom hallways and Logan's uncertain face. He wasn't sure when he'd morphed into a man who worried about school drop-off lines and parent-teacher conferences, but here he was. The next day, Henry took Logan by taxi to visit two prospective schools while Logan's mother opted to rest at home. The first school was housed in a bright, modern building, its walls adorned with colorful student art. A friendly administrator greeted them, leading them on a brief tour. They passed rows of lockers, a library filled with storybooks, and a playground bustling with boisterous energy. Logan watched kids chase each other under the mild spring sun, his gaze half curious, half intimidated. Inside, a prospective teacher introduced herself, asking Logan about his interests. Logan mumbled about books and building projects. The teacher responded with genuine interest, outlining how they could help him catch up. Henry felt a prickle of relief, but he still recognized the spark of apprehension in Logan's eyes. New places, new people, everything was a leap. The second school was smaller, nestled in a leafy neighborhood just west of the first. The corridors were quieter, class sizes smaller. A guidance counselor, sensing Logan's hesitation, took them to the library's reading nook. It was cozy, with beanbag chairs and low shelves of graphic novels. Logan's face lit up slightly, and he opened one of the books, scanning the pages. Henry overheard the counselor explaining that many of their students needed individualized attention, which they prided themselves on providing. By the end of that visit, Logan seemed more relaxed. Outside, on the steps of the building, Henry knelt down. "What do you think?" he asked. Logan glanced back at the school, inhaling the crisp air. "I like this one," he said softly. "It feels calmer." Henry nodded, struck by how composed Logan was in making the choice. "Then let's do it," he said, aware that he was willing to rearrange his entire schedule to support the boy's transition. On the ride home, Logan was uncharacteristically quiet, likely processing the day's experiences. Henry didn't press him for conversation, sensing the need for space. Instead, he watched the city's skyline flicker by in a palette of glass and steel. When they finally returned to the penthouse, Logan's mother was awake, perched in the living area with a paperback novel. She looked up, gaze shifting questioningly between Henry and Logan. "I like the smaller one," Logan announced, his voice subdued but resolute. "The people were really nice." She exhaled, tension sliding from her posture. "That's wonderful," she replied, relief evident in her smile. "I'm glad you found somewhere that feels right." Henry joined her on the couch, explaining the details of enrollment deadlines and the support services the school offered. He couldn't ignore the stab of concern in her eyes. Was she worried he'd overshadow her role as Logan's parent? Did she fear losing the sense of connection she'd built with Logan over the years? The questions simmered, but he sensed that transparency and reassurance mattered most. He reaffirmed that this was about giving Logan stability, not pulling him away from her. Later that evening, the three of them gathered around a modest dinner. Logan recounted highlights from the school visits, shyly mentioning his excitement about the library. His mother chimed in to ask about the schedule, curious about how early he'd need to wake up for classes. They all spoke in calm, measured voices, a trio navigating new terrain. Henry felt a subtle shift in the air. This wasn't the frantic tension of strangers thrown together by circumstance. It was the tentative beginning of a life shared. After clearing the table, Logan flopped onto the sofa, rummaging through the children's atlas. Henry hovered near him, gently reminding him it was getting late. With only slight protest, Logan trudged to his room to change into pajamas, carrying the book under his arm. Henry lingered, feeling his shoulders relax. He crossed to the window, gazing out at the twinkling skyscrapers once more, but this time the city's bustle seemed less daunting. Nearby, Logan's mother stepped beside him. "We're doing okay, right?" she whispered, following his gaze into the night. Henry nodded, placing a tentative hand on her arm. "Better than okay," he murmured. "We're doing something good." Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like, and share with friends. Early on a Monday morning, the household stirred awake with a sense of anticipation. Logan's first official day at his new school had arrived. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, and Henry quietly set out plates on the kitchen island, hoping to entice Logan with an early breakfast. Though Logan usually woke with minimal prodding, Henry wanted to ensure a calm start. He could sense the boy's nerves about meeting new classmates and facing a structured routine. Beside a bowl of cereal and fresh fruit, Henry placed a small note of encouragement. He wasn't one for sentimental gestures, but something about fatherhood made him want to offer that extra reassurance. When Logan wandered into the kitchen, hair tousled, he blinked in mild surprise at the note. Henry watched him read it, just a single sentence wishing him good luck and reminding him to have fun. Logan's cheeks colored with a shy smile, and he murmured thanks. He sat down, nudging the cereal with his spoon as if still gathering the courage to eat. Soon his mother joined them, using the kitchen counter for support as she moved. She gave Logan a reassuring rub on the shoulder. "You're going to be great," she whispered. Logan nodded but remained quiet, eyes focused on the bright morning light. Henry filled a travel mug with coffee for himself, then offered to walk Logan to school. The building was only a short drive away, but Henry felt the gesture was important. He wanted to see Logan safely inside, to meet a teacher or two, and to show him that someone would be there if he felt overwhelmed. They gathered Logan's new backpack, double-checked the contents, pencils, notebooks, a water bottle, and stepped out into the crisp air of the lobby. The doorman gave Logan a warm smile, apparently well aware of the boy's milestone. Logan clutched Henry's hand for just a moment as they left the building. During the short ride, Logan gazed at the passing streets, tapping his foot nervously. Henry placed a reassuring palm on the boy's shoulder. "Remember," he said, "if you need anything, absolutely anything, tell a teacher or call me. You don't have to handle it all alone." Logan nodded. "I know," he said softly, though the tremor in his voice hinted at deeper anxiety. Henry reminded himself that to a child who had never settled in one place, the prospect of a stable routine could be both exhilarating and terrifying. They arrived at the school, a modest brick structure with wide windows and a cheerful sign near the entrance. Even at this early hour, the courtyard buzzed with kids in brightly colored jackets, some hugging parents goodbye, others racing toward friends. Logan hesitated at the gates, scanning the sea of unfamiliar faces. Gently, Henry guided him toward the front office, where the guidance counselor from their visit, Ms. Patel, greeted them. She wore a welcoming smile. "Logan, I'm so glad you're here," she said. She handed him a simple schedule and nodded at Henry. "We'll take good care of him," she assured, seeing the flicker of concern in Henry's eyes. They walked down a short hallway toward Logan's homeroom. The walls featured student drawings and motivational quotes. Henry's gaze flickered over each detail, imagining Logan's future contributions pinned up there. The classroom itself was half full of students settling in for the day, a low buzz of chatter filling the air. Ms. Patel introduced Logan to the teacher, a gentle-faced woman named Ms. Alvarez, who crouched to speak to him at eye level. "Welcome," she said, her voice kind. "We're so excited you're joining us. Why don't you take a seat here by the window?" Logan drifted over to the desk indicated, shoulders slightly hunched. Henry hung back, feeling a surge of conflicting emotions. He recognized that Logan needed to navigate this space without being overshadowed by an anxious father. Ms. Patel sensed his hesitation and placed a hand on his arm. "He'll be fine," she whispered. "We'll call if there's any problem." Henry nodded. With one last look at Logan, who offered a tentative wave, Henry stepped out into the corridor, heart pounding. It felt surreal to leave him there, but he had to believe this was the beginning of something good. Returning to the penthouse alone, Henry found Logan's mother pacing the living area, evidently more anxious than she wanted to admit. The moment Henry walked in, she peppered him with questions. Did Logan seem scared? Did the teacher look kind? Would the kids in class be welcoming? Henry recounted every detail, reassuring her that the staff had been wonderful. Still, he couldn't entirely banish the knot of worry in his own chest. Parenting, he realized, was an unrelenting exercise in both faith and readiness, to let them grow while being prepared to catch them if they fell. The hours inched by, and Henry tried to distract himself with work. He attended 2 virtual meetings, confirmed a product launch timeline, and fired off a slew of emails. Yet every so often, he'd glance at the clock, counting down to when Logan's school day ended. Around mid-afternoon, the phone rang. Henry's heart lurched, but it was only an investor confirming their next meeting. He concluded the call in record time and spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing reports. Finally, when the time to pick Logan up approached, Henry grabbed his coat, told Logan's mother he'd return soon, and headed out. The sidewalk outside the school was filled with parents, siblings, and babysitters, all waiting for dismissal. Henry stood off to the side, scanning the clusters of children emerging from the front doors. At last, he spotted Logan making his way down the steps, shoulders still rounded with cautious reserve. Henry raised a hand in greeting, and Logan hurried forward, face unreadable. "Hey," Henry said. "How was your first day?" Logan shrugged, hugging his backpack close. "It was okay, I guess," he mumbled. Henry studied him carefully. "Just okay?" They started walking toward the car, weaving through the departing crowd. Once they settled into the back seat, Logan loosened his grip on the backpack and exhaled. "It was weird," he admitted, voice almost a whisper. "Everyone already has friends. I didn't know who to talk to at lunch, so I just sat by myself. And there's this boy who kept looking at me like I was, different." Henry's chest tightened. He recalled his own childhood experiences, times when he felt out of place among more socially confident kids. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "It takes time to get used to everything. Maybe tomorrow you could talk to Ms. Alvarez about someone who shares your interests." Logan shrugged again, but nodded. "Ms. Alvarez was nice," he conceded. "She let me read a book after I finished my work." Henry offered a gentle smile, relieved to hear at least one positive detail. "That's something, and you'll figure out the rest. You're brave." Logan didn't reply, but he seemed grateful for the reassurance. When they arrived at the penthouse, Logan's mother greeted them with a hopeful smile. Henry stepped back, letting Logan explain how the day went. In halting phrases, he recounted the new classroom, the teacher, and the general confusion of the cafeteria. Though he didn't dwell on his loneliness, Henry could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. She coaxed a half-hearted grin out of him by promising a special dessert that evening, pudding with whipped cream, something Logan had once declared his favorite. Henry retreated to his study to take a work call, but he kept an ear tuned to the soft hum of conversation beyond the door. When he finished, he ventured back out, finding Logan hunched over a piece of paper, scribbling intently. "Drawing?" Henry asked. Logan shrugged. "Sort of," he said, pivoting the paper to reveal a rough sketch of a spaceship. "I thought maybe if I build a model like this, I could bring it in and show some kids I like sci-fi stuff." Henry recognized the undercurrent of longing in the boy's words, a subtle attempt at forging connections through shared interests. "Great idea," Henry said, pulling a chair closer. "We can start on it tonight if you want. Maybe it'll help people see what you're into." Logan's mother joined them at the table, resting her elbows gently. Together they planned out how they might transform an old shoebox into something resembling a rocket, labeling what materials they needed. Logan brightened at the collaboration, his earlier gloom replaced by the spark of creativity. Henry felt a swell of pride at the simple notion that, by building a cardboard rocket, Logan might find a way to connect with new classmates. These were the small moments that counted. True to her promise, Logan's mother served pudding for dessert, each dish topped with whipped cream and a tiny chocolate sprinkling. The three of them clinked spoons in a playful toast before digging in. The tension in Logan's face eased with every bite, and by the time Henry guided him to bed, the boy seemed lighter, the rough edges of the school day softened. "Thank you," Logan muttered drowsily, half buried under his blankets. Henry frowned slightly. "For what?" Logan shrugged. "Just for making it feel okay." A simple statement that carried the weight of a child who had never before leaned on a parent for emotional support. Henry flicked off the light, leaving a small nightlight glowing in the corner. Outside in the hallway, he encountered Logan's mother. She was leaning against the wall, arms folded. "He's tough," she whispered, "but he gets lonely so fast." Henry nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat. "We'll help him through it," he promised. She patted his arm in agreement, then turned toward her own room. In that simple exchange, Henry understood that while the path might be bumpy, they were walking it together, and for Logan that made all the difference. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like, and share with friends. Henry woke the next morning with a subtle hint of excitement, as though something important waited on the horizon. Over the past week, Logan had grown more accustomed to his new school, forging tentative friendships and slowly letting go of his initial fears. Each day, Henry or Logan's mother walked him to the gates, exchanging words of encouragement before letting him blend into the routine bustle of morning arrivals. In the evening, they heard stories about new classmates who shared his fascination with model planes and cardboard inventions. Gradually, Logan's once guarded smile turned genuine, and Henry felt a surge of pride every time the boy rattled off details about lunchtime adventures. This morning marked yet another step forward. Logan insisted he was ready to walk into school on his own, unafraid. The air in the penthouse was bright and warm as Henry prepared scrambled eggs and toast, determined to send Logan off with a hearty breakfast. Logan's mother, looking healthier each day, sipped tea at the kitchen island, an open cookbook in front of her. She seemed eager to expand her repertoire of simple meals, insisting it was time she contributed more around the home. Whenever Henry caught her eye, she gifted him a thankful half-smile, as though acknowledging how far they'd come since those uncertain days in the hospital. Meanwhile, Logan rummaged for his backpack, excited to present his latest cardboard invention during show and tell. He'd painted it silver over the weekend, stars sprinkled across the sides, and he proudly set it beside his breakfast, explaining how the rocket's engine worked. After breakfast, they descended to the street, where the morning bustle welcomed them. Cars honked, Pedestrians hurried by and a light breeze rustled the collar of Henry's jacket. Logan clutched his rocket ship in one hand, backpack slung over his shoulder. His mother stood beside him, offering a last gentle pat on his arm. "You'll do great," she said warmly. Henry flagged down a taxi, and within minutes they were outside Logan's school. This time, Logan insisted on walking through the gates alone, standing straighter than before. He glanced back just once, waving at Henry and his mother before disappearing into the throng of students. Henry's chest swelled with pride, aware that Logan was forging his own path with every step. "He's braver every day," Henry murmured, and she nodded. They rode home in amicable silence, each carrying a private reflection on Logan's progress. Once inside the penthouse, Henry's motherly companion settled on the couch, her cane tucked nearby, and reached for a folder of documents Henry had left on the coffee table. "More paperwork?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. Henry rubbed his temple. "Legal steps," he explained. "Custody, guardianship, ensuring Logan's future. I want to be prepared no matter what." She scanned the pages, lips parted in a faint sigh. "I appreciate you thinking ahead," she admitted. "But do we have to rush it?" Henry sat beside her. "Not if you're uncomfortable," he said gently. "I just don't want Logan caught in a tangle of uncertainties." She nodded, realizing his intent, and rested a hand on his arm, grateful. Over the next couple of days, they discussed formal arrangements more candidly, sitting at the dining table after Logan had gone to bed. Henry proposed a joint guardianship, ensuring Logan's mother retained her parental rights while Henry held legal recognition as Logan's father. She agreed in principle, though she insisted on consulting a neutral lawyer. Henry supported that, wanting everything above board. Their conversations were frank but respectful, both acknowledging past missteps, yet focusing on Logan's well-being. Meanwhile, Logan continued to blossom at school, returning home with stories of classmates who asked to see his rocket or teamed with him in group projects. Each anecdote made Henry's heart swell with relief, because every happy moment hinted at a future free from uncertainty and isolation. At last, they felt like a family. One afternoon, Henry surprised Logan by picking him up from school on foot instead of taking a car. They ambled side by side along the city sidewalk, Logan animatedly recounting how he'd volunteered to read aloud in class. His teacher praised his expressive voice, and a few classmates clapped when he finished. Henry listened intently, recalling his own childhood shyness. At a small park, they stopped to watch ducks paddling in a pond. Logan tossed bits of bread to them, giggling when the ducks scrambled for crumbs. Henry realized these stolen moments, shared laughter, unhurried walks, defined the connection he'd always overlooked. He felt proud not only of Logan, but also of himself for learning to slow down, leaving behind the frantic pursuit of success he'd once thought essential. That evening, after dinner, the three of them gathered around the living room coffee table to finalize Logan's guardianship documents. A notary arrived, exchanging polite greetings before patiently overseeing signatures. Logan's mother took a shaky breath as she wrote her name. Mindful of how this paper represented both her trust in Henry and her acceptance that Logan deserved a stable father figure, Henry signed as well, steady hand reflecting his certainty. When it was done, the notary offered congratulations in formal tones and departed quietly. Logan, watching from the couch, didn't fully grasp the legalities, but sensed the importance. "Does this mean you're my dad forever?" he asked, voice trembling with emotion. Henry knelt before him, replying softly, "Yes, always." The boy threw his arms around Henry, sealing the moment. Over the next week, life at the penthouse settled into a peaceful rhythm. Logan woke early for school, sometimes chattering excitedly about a class project, other times yawning but resolute in heading out the door. Henry managed his business affairs with renewed vigor, often scheduling conference calls around Logan's pickup time, determined to be there in person. Logan's mother gradually embraced a more active routine, strolling through nearby parks and even helping Logan with homework. In the evenings, they cooked simple dinners together, establishing small rituals, like Logan setting the table with surprising pride. Discussions flowed freely about everything from new books to Henry's latest product launch, weaving them closer as a unit. Sometimes Henry marveled at how a single chance meeting in a lobby had cascaded into profound change. One Friday afternoon, Henry returned from a business lunch to find Logan and his mother huddled over a photo album on the coffee table. A soft laugh escaped Logan as he pointed to faded snapshots of his mother from years earlier. She had found the album packed away in her old suitcase, which she finally felt ready to open. Henry approached, curious to see glimpses of her life before illness, before secrets overshadowed everything. There were shots of her in various places: beaches, small apartments, humble celebrations. Logan pointed out a photo of her laughing amid a group of friends, exclaiming how different she looked with short hair. Henry smiled, touched that she shared these pieces of her journey, allowing him to see fragments of the person he'd never known. Later that night, the three of them sat on the balcony, watching city lights glitter against the darkness. Logan babbled about a field trip his teacher announced, eyes gleaming with anticipation. His mother leaned back in her chair, breathing deeply, the strain of illness no longer etched so sharply across her features. Henry rested his elbows on the railing, heart brimming with gratitude. This family they'd formed glowed with promise, grounded by simple evenings and shared laughter. He recalled the moment Logan first approached him in that hotel lobby, voice proclaiming, "Mom said you're my dad." It felt like a lifetime ago. Now, watching Logan grin, Henry knew risk and sacrifice had been worth it. There under the sky, they embraced new tomorrows, bound not by chance but by choice. You've liked this story. Please subscribe to our channel, like, and share with friends.